Hey friends, welcome back to the Above Board podcast. Today I am delighted to introduce Eliana Goldstein to our show. Eliana is a certified professional coach and speaker. She is the founder of Eliana Goldstein Coaching, where she has supported thousands of individuals in both securing new roles and building careers that they can genuinely look forward to. Eliana is the resident career coach for CBS Morning News and has been featured on publications like CNBC, Business Insider, and Fast Money. Eliana, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to chat with you and to be here.
I'm excited too. I have a lot of different topics as
hmm
I was preparing for this conversation today, so I might go all over the place. But I did want to chat with you. But before we do that, I just kind of wanted the audience to hear a little bit about your story, like specifically your career evolution to how you
hmm
arrived in this pivotal role for career coaching.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a story that a lot of people can probably relate to. I worked in the ad tech industry for about a decade. I was in ad sales, and by all means, I had a great on paper career. I was, making the money that I wanted early on, and I was growing within that career. But I always kind of had this nagging sensation of just feeling like this isn't it, or really, how much longer can I do this? I felt a lot of, honestly, I hate the cliche of imposter syndrome, but I felt a lot of imposter syndrome. I lacked confidence in myself, especially in a sales environment where people are very eager and they're going above and beyond for their clients, and I never felt that same drive. And I wondered if it was because there was something wrong with me, or a lack of abilities on my end. And I always had these questions kind of in my head. And so it kind of led me through making a series of changes. And I thought, okay, let me just pivot a little bit. Let me try this different company. Maybe I'll feel more aligned here. And then kind of the same feeling would set in. And then I would change again. Okay, maybe like it's not the company, but I have to slightly switch industries. I'd try something different. And I kept finding myself back in the same place. And I was fortunate that I was always able to secure jobs easily. I think having a sales background lends very well to knowing how to network, knowing how to present yourself, knowing how to negotiate. So that part kind of came naturally and easily to me, but I just kept finding myself in roles that just were not a fit. And it came to a point where I just said, okay, this isn't working anymore. I really got to kind of scrap this, start all over. And it led me down a path of, honestly, a lot of like personal development, self-reflection, really thinking about what hasn't been working, what could be working better. I did a ton of networking, market research, just exploring and speaking to people to really figure out what felt more aligned for me and kind of what was out there that aligned with my strengths and, what engaged me the most. And through all of that, there's a brief period of time I thought about going back to school and really realized school was not for me. And I decided to kind of try out coaching. I knew a few people who had been in a coaching certification program. So I decided to kind of dip my toes in, try that out, see how it would work. And it was a great program. I loved it. And I was still working at the time. So I started as a side hustle back before like side hustles got super, super popular. And I was kind of just secretly doing it on the side. And then eventually kind of got to a point where I said, okay, it's time to jump off the deep end, went all in. And that was just about 6 years ago. And yeah, I've just been building and developing ever since. And I love it. And I feel like I always say, I feel grateful every day that I was able to kind of figure it out and be where I am now.
Yeah, I mean, your passion shines through even like hearing you talk about it. And I asked that question because I feel like it's important for folks listening this to understand that, because in my opinion, like there's nothing more frustrating than a consultant who consults on a thing that they've never done themselves. And so
Yes.
you've had this career and you've had this evolution. It's almost like in my world of finance, it's like getting financial advice from a planner who filed bankruptcy. You know what I mean? Like that
Yes.
probably discredits the advice a little bit, but you've been there and done that, so to speak. And I think as I'm hearing you say all this, I have a question, and it's kind of out of left field, but when you
Yeah.
finally made that jump 6 years ago,
hmm
how did you feel? Like, were you nervous? Were you scared? Were you ready? Like, do you remember the emotions that were coming up at that time?
Oh my gosh, I was terrified.
Were you?
100%. I am very much type A planner. God, it's all got to be lined up. Don't honestly do very well in uncertainty. So it was a really, really scary thing for me. And it was a funny time because the company I was at, I had in one of my final moves, I moved to the startup, and the startup was actually shutting down the specific brand. It was a startup that was a subsidiary of a larger company, and they were actually going to be shutting down the department I was working for. But because I was in biz dev, they were giving me the opportunity to switch to a different part of the company. And
Right.
so I kind of was faced with this choice of like severance package, or you can continue working with us. So I could have kept going, but I almost felt like it was this sign of you're being given a choice. Like, you can do this. Like, this is the opportunity to capitalize on. But I was so scared because I was leaving a little bit more of a sure thing. But it was just like a gut feeling. And in the beginning, there were so many nerves. Is this going to work? Am I going to have to go back to corporate? All those things. But being able to kind of like move through those ebbs and flows, I feel like was such a lesson for me. So yeah, it was definitely scary though.
I've heard you in other podcasts and publications. I've heard you say the pain of staying the same is worse than the pain of change.
Oh, for
And I
sure.
feel like that's cool because I mean that's advice that you give, but like you embodied that. Like you made that
Absolutely.
transition in your own career.
Yeah, it's all like comes to, your comfort zone. And as we all know, like staying in your comfort zone is more comfortable. It can feel easy in the moment, but the long-term pain that will cause is inevitably worse than the short-term pain you will feel if and when, you make the leap in the decision. And that doesn't mean that there won't be other problems that pop up, or that it won't be really scary in the moments. But like when you look back in 5 years, I can almost guarantee that if you made the change, you will be like, I'm so glad that I went through that level of serious discomfort to
Mhm.
ultimately be where I am right now.
Yeah. And as you're working with individuals where you're helping them in their career and talking are these conversations that you're having? I would imagine it is. Like obviously like there's certain aspects to the work that you do where I'm like, okay, Eliana and her team that they're helping people make sure like they're doing the right networking things and their
Yes.
resumes up to speed and some of those things I'm sure are like
Yeah.
table stakes in the work that you do. But I think what we're talking about right now, that's very pivotal. So you do that, you have those conversations as well.
Before anything else. Like, we
Cool.
always start whenever I'm talking to a client or a potential client, I always say, I know that you might roll your eyes, you might think this is unimportant, but we always start with the mindset work and the confidence building. Because, and like the analogy I always make is, building a house, there has to be a solid foundation. Otherwise, the house will be unstable. And it's the same thing. Like, if you are starting on shaky grounds and, worrying about, you know, am I able to do this? Well, this one thing that happened to me in my career, like, how is this going to present and what are people going to be thinking about me? Like, if you are entering into a process of making any type of a career change and you're having all those feelings in the back of your head, those are inevitably going to come through, whether it is when you're presenting on an interview or networking, or how you're describing yourself on your resume. So I always tell people, like, we got to clear the cobwebs before you do anything else, because that will impact you far more than you realize.
Yeah. And something that I hear you talk a lot about too is investing in yourself. And I think
Mhm.
it's fun to hear you say that because that's talk tracks we have with folks all the time as well.
Of
Like
course.
the phrase that I use a lot is especially working with maybe families that are in their 30s and 40s and are kind of at that like they're in the accumulation phase of building their wealth
Mhm.
and their money. And I tell them all the time, like, you are your biggest asset. So be sure to invest in yourself because a lot of times people are like, what's the cool thing I can invest in? And like, I want to buy
Yeah.
cryptocurrency and have 1,000% return. And of course it never works like that. It's never
Of
that
course.
easy. And your biggest ROI is always going to be on your own career growth and what you're developing and working towards.
Yeah.
And I imagine that's I mean certainly you agree with that statement. Can we talk a little bit about that and how you help folks invest in themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely agree. I mean, it's the most important thing. And I think that wherever you are in your career, there's always different ways to invest in yourself, and it's going to look different, right? Again, whether it's you're at this place where you've been doing well, kind of similar to what I was describing about myself. Everything's good on paper, but there's something kind of nagging at you, or you feel like you're stuck in a golden handcuffs position. It feels easy to continue, but thinking about investing in yourself in the perspective of, okay, well, something doesn't feel right. let me take some time to really explore and see what else could be out there. And, again, the ROI on that is potentially being able to make this great career change, right? Or maybe you're in a role where you're actually incredibly lucky. You love the company that you're working at. You love your boss. You love the team that you're working with. But you don't want to stagnate. You don't want to plateau, because that's when things really start to deteriorate. It's thinking about investing in, well, what comes next? What does this internal path look like for me? So it's always like investing in yourself is going to look different for every single individual. But regardless of where you are in your career, how junior, how senior, there is always an opportunity to be thinking about what's coming next and trying to be, strategic about it. And while, yes, we can't plan every aspect of our career, whatever we can do to be more proactive about it is always going to be helpful. And like, that is really the key to investing. Like, it creates this element of proactivity in how you're addressing yourself and your career.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm going to ask a loaded question next.
Please.
But can you, and I already know the answer to this, but I still want to hear you say it, because like, what's fun about this conversation is like, you've got two individuals who very much are passionate about the work that they do. So like, if you asked me like, oh, like, do you really love what you do? I'm like, yeah, almost all the time, but not always. So my loaded question is, can someone in this career climate, in the workforce climate, whatever the case may be, but like, can someone genuinely find the work that they love to do?
Yeah, I think it's such a good question. And I think like there's like a lot of components to that. So at a very high
It
level,
was loaded.
yeah, it's loaded, but it's a really important question. I think it's a question that we all think about and wonder all the time. So at a high level, yes, I do truly believe that we can all, what I'll say is, rather than like love, I think we can all find way more aligned careers that bring us a higher sense of satisfaction and career fulfillment. Something I'm really careful about is like the concept of a dream job, right? Like it's a phrase we all hear, find your dream job, like all these different things. I believe that it sets a very unrealistic expectation, because there is nothing that's a perfect dream. Like, as you said, you work for yourself, I work for myself. I would be lying if I told you every day is perfect, or that I don't have a really hard weeks now, even, 6 years into my career, or where I don't question things. There's always going to be difficult moments, and there's always going to be work or projects that you're doing that don't light you up and don't get as excited. And I think the concept of a dream career is that for the most part, everything is just smooth sailing. And then especially kind of like the millennial, even Gen Z generation, then when we hit a bump, we kind of start to spiral and we go, well, maybe this isn't it. Like, if I shouldn't be feeling this way if I'm in my ideal role, right? So I think that we have to be realistic. And I like to kind of think about a rule as a 70-30 rule, that for the most part, you should be engaged in about 70% of the work that you're doing. And I say engaged, not loving 70% of the work that you're doing, because there's a difference between, oh, I love this, I die to do these tasks, versus I am generally engaged in this type of work, right? So about 70% of the work that we're doing should engage us, should feel like it aligns with our skill sets that come more naturally to us, versus 30% of the time we might be doing work that kind of we just have to do because it's a part of our role, that doesn't maybe lean into our skill sets as much, but it's just, a byproduct of, being in your career. So I think that we're all capable of finding that, and that a big part of the reason many of us are not in there are because, number one, again, we kind of stay in our comfort zone where it's easier. We kind of get into this golden handcuffs position, or we really just haven't done the work to figure out, well, what even engages me in the first place, and where do my strengths really come through? What are my skill sets, right? And we have to do that work in order to kind of start building that path moving forward.
I mean, I'm self-assessing as I'm hearing you say this, thinking about the 70-30 rule. And I'm like, I have a passion for what I do. And there are seasons of life in my career where I'm like, man, is 70% of what I do enjoyable and engaging? And, because on the flip side, we could probably go to the detriment or the difficulty of being a business owner and an entrepreneur. I mean, there's always 1,000 things. The work's never done. You could always do more. And there's, managing a team, and there's a lot of stress that comes with that too. Gosh, I can vividly remember I was in a senior in college. I called my mom and I was like, I don't like, to have this kind of conversation, like what is, aligning my passion and my values with the work that I want, like, how am I going to find what I love doing? And I remember, and this is fun because this is like a bit of a generational difference, but I remember her being like,
Hmm.
this whole like being in love with your job thing, like, that's not all that it's cracked up to be. It's not true. It's a job, do a job, and it was very like just pragmatic advice where I was like,
Yeah.
interesting. Like, and for context, I'm 38. So like this would have been I was coming out of school in like the 2008, like the Great Recession of '08. It was really hard
Yeah.
to get a job, right? Like no one
Yeah.
was hiring at that time. And so it's kind of like take what you can get. And so I always liked finance. I went into this profession, but I didn't like the company that I worked for. And it wasn't until I actually started my own company that I was able to like reignite that passion and align those
Hmm.
values. But there's got to be something said for like just the generational gap too, on the difference of, because that
100%.
was actually sound advice for me. Because it definitely, I felt like I was a little disillusioned. And even hearing you
Yeah.
today is sound advice, because it's like the idea that you're going to 100% love what you do all the time, always and forever and ever, amen, is just not even reality. Because if everyone felt that way, it wouldn't be work, and it would be a lot easier to make good money and do these things. Like work is
Exactly.
hard.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think exactly as you said, like very kind of like boomer advice of, a job's a job, just do your job. And I get that advice completely, especially, my parents are baby boomers
Yeah.
as well.
I loved
And
that advice because I feel like I needed it. It like balanced me of like, I need to
a
love what I
hundred percent.
do,
A
Yeah.
100%. And I think like exactly as you said, I think you said something really important. Like there are seasons, right? And it's so important to kind of assess what season you are in. And I
Mhm.
think too, especially like we think about the job market right now, we think about people who are graduating, AI coming in and the fear of taking jobs and the fact that we know it's actually harder to get entry level jobs right now. And that is
Right.
probably only going to increase, right? It might be that you're in a season where you do just need to get your foot in the door, and it might be taking a role that you're not immediately like super excited about. But I think the important thing is then not just kind of just relenting to the idea of, okay, well, this is my job and this is what it's going to be forever, right? That's your first job. It's okay to kind of go in to get experience, and that you can still grow from there. And if you recognize, okay, I've been in this job now for a year or two and I really don't feel engaged in the majority of the work that I'm doing, well, then start thinking about, well, where do I feel engaged, right? And is
Mhm.
there an opportunity for me to, one, lean more into that work, right? Have I even spoken to my manager or my boss about saying, hey, this is a work that ultimately engages me and where I ultimately feel I bring the most value to this team. Is there an opportunity for me to do more of this work? And if not, could I explore some type of internal move, right? Or at that point, I now have a couple of years of work experience under my belt. Can I make an internal switch, right? But there will be seasons of life where you kind of got to do what you got to do to get your foot in the door, whether it's a more difficult job market, whether it's just gaining the necessary experience. A lot of the times, like thinking about from the perspective of parenting, like I have two young kids myself. I have a lot of clients who have young children, and speaking to them about the fact that right now your priority might not be work, and it might be having to kind of focus more so on what's going on at home, which means you might have to be in a job where there's just more flexibility and there's more work life balance. And maybe the work doesn't necessarily light you up as much or get you as excited, because that's the season of life you're in right now. And right now, your version of success aligns more with like flexibility, being present for my family. But the
Mhm.
idea is like you're constantly coming back to and assessing about where you're at and what has changed or evolved, as opposed to kind of just feeling like it's very much that like fixed mindset of like, this is where I am and this is the cards I've been dealt and I'm just going to continue like this, for the
Yeah.
foreseeable future.
Well, I enjoy how you explain that, because it's very proactive. Even if it's your own inner dialogue, doing your own assessments and figuring out where things are, or talking with your employer about, what can I be doing to advance in my career or what have you. It's just very proactive, and it's being an advocate for yourself, because like, going back to a previous generation or like the baby boomer generation, for example, it wasn't uncommon that they would just like work in their career, stay at that same company for 30 years.
Yep.
And frankly, if you probably did nothing else but just sort of stay status quo, you were getting cost of living adjustments, you were getting raises, you're probably getting,
Exactly.
title adjustments every few years, right? So it's just such a different work environment that I
It's
do
so
think it
different.
requires a lot of self-advocacy. And then in working with you, I think it's important to even understand like I think A, to have the tools, and then B, to understand, like, can I even do this? Like, it's okay to do this. It's okay to come. Like, we have a very, open dialogue. Our core values as a company is candor, accountability, teamwork, and unreasonable hospitality. Those are our four core values as a company. And
I
so,
love
like,
that.
we're very open to the idea of our team coming to us and saying, like, hey, our vision is so big that we want your vision to be able to fit inside this, whatever your career track looks like. If you make a hard 90 pivot and want to do something different, I want to know about that, because
Yeah.
if you're not passionate about what you're doing right now, like, you're going to burn out, and I want to have those conversations. And I guess maybe more employers are open to that. I don't know. What are some of the trends that you're seeing in the workforce right now? I mean, are employers open to that type of dialogue? Are you finding?
I think that, I mean, it depends on the company,
Yeah.
right? There definitely, and it depends on leadership. It's, as we were saying before, like when you have kind of leadership that's more of that baby boomer generation where it's a little bit more, this is what it is. You take your role, you do
Yeah.
what's asked of you. It's going to be a little bit
Right.
different. But I think
You need
that
10 years before you're entitled to that
ex-
role, you know? Yeah.
exactly. But I think that in terms of, I mean, look, we think like every millennial, even compared to Gen Z, completely different in terms of how they think about work. So companies that are going to be successful and where there's going to be longevity are going to need to adapt to the generation that is in the workforce, which is now predominantly millennial and will, eventually be predominantly Gen Z as well. And so I think that it's important to think about, how am I retaining talent, right? It's so much harder. It's so much more expensive to be bringing in new individuals and new employees versus retaining the talent that you have. And if you look at and you ask, millennials about like what is important to you, almost like 100% of the time, they will tell you like one of the most important aspects to them when they think about a company is growth opportunities, right? They want the opportunity to be able to grow internally. Like there's a belief that millennials, Gen Z want to be job hoppers. They want to switch, every few years. This is what they want to do. But if you actually speak to them about it, if they
Mm.
could be at a company where they genuinely had the opportunity to continuously grow, they would stay there happily. They just don't necessarily feel like that opportunity is available to them. So they almost feel forced into job hopping. And I think that that's, a part of that is the fact that companies aren't really good at lateral or internal movement and being able to kind of create those internal growth paths. And the other part of it is that a lot of people don't advocate enough on behalf of themselves and get clear on, again, that idea of where can I add value. So both those things combined lead to, bleeding a lot of good talent and people, job hopping every few years or so. So I think that's, it depends on where you are, but that's at least what I notice and see in all my conversations.
That's a real aha moment for me, wearing like the employer hat. So like I tried to come into this conversation very much looking at it from like the person, like the individual that might be an employee working through a company. But
Mm-hmm.
from that perspective, that's so good to hear, because you do hear that a lot about Gen Z, and this misconception that, oh well, it's like job hopping from one thing to the next, or like quiet quitting is like another
Yep.
big term that's in the industry, right, or in the world right now. And it's fun because like I will say, just kind of speaking on behalf of the rest of my team, like we do have Gen Z individuals that work for us, and they're awesome. Like and I do think it's maybe an aha moment and important to hear from folks that are listening to this podcast that are on the employer side, that are on the
Yeah.
hiring and developing and training and HR, whatever. Like this is crucial to hear this stuff, because I think some of these misconceptions that are out there is not true. It probably has more to do with the work environment that maybe you're providing, or the culture that you're providing as a team. I have a question. It's a little
100%. Yeah.
specific, but are you finding that virtual, I mean, since COVID, obviously, like, virtual work became the new thing, but
Yeah.
obviously this year you're hearing more and more about people going back into the office. What's the trend on virtual work?
I think that honestly, there was obviously like virtual remote work was huge for a while, and I was definitely hearing and seeing from people, I want a job that's fully remote. I want a job that's fully remote. I would say in the past year or two, that's changed a little bit, where I'm actually seeing people crave more so hybrid environments, where they're feeling the sense of, I like being in person. I like community. I want to be with others. I don't want to kind of just feel like I'm sucked in and alone all day. But I also don't want to feel like I am being forced to come into an office every single day because, again, the CEO of my company works better in person, right? So I think that most people now are in this place of wanting something hybrid. And I think that it's a really happy medium because I do think, look, I work for myself, and a lot of the time, like, I have a team of coaches, but we're all virtual, right? So like,
Mhm.
I think to myself, oh, it'd be lovely if we could all, sometimes get together in person. Like, I do think that's a really important part of work, like that element of community and face to face communication. But I do think it's important to give people that space to work independently. And I think, again, going back to this idea of values, when you speak to millennials, when you speak to Gen Z as well, a lot of them will talk about like flexibility or freedom as a core work value. And I think hybrid creates that and helps to support that. So I think it's very important.
Yeah, well, this is affirmation. This is good to hear because we're a hybrid work environment. So
Love it.
I would say we're like at our firm, it's probably 90% virtual. And then, a couple times a month, the team comes into the office and we have an office location to meet with clients. And so, maybe I'm here twice a week. And I got to say, from my own personal point of view, it does feel nice to have both because there are
Yeah.
days where the convenience of working from home trumps anything else. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I need to be able to pick up the kids at this time, or there's a doctor's appointment or what have you. I got to be close to home and I can do all my Zooms and be just as efficient. And then there are days like today and yesterday where I'm like, it'd be really nice to just plug in, no distractions, be at the office and meet people face to face and work. So I
Exactly.
do agree. And then, so are a lot of employers actually offering that, or is it? I guess like the thing I hear on the news when I see headlines, it's like, oh, J.P. Morgan's calling people back to the
Yes.
office. I mean, is it?
Yeah.
Is it? Does it seem to be the case that it's being offered?
I think it's still like there's definitely still a lot of companies that are offering hybrid work. I think that, exactly as you said, like especially like in financial industries, banking industries, you're seeing a lot of those headlines, and that's kind of a lot of those times. Like when you see the justification behind it, you'll see kind of like the CEO be like, "Well, I always work best in person environments, and it's so important to our field." And a lot of it is kind of how leadership feels they work, and then they're imposing that on the rest of their organization. And I think
Mhm.
that in itself like strips this sense of autonomy that workers feel around, well, do you trust me to get my work done, right? And
Mhm.
ultimately, like, as long as I'm being productive, that's what should matter, right? And when you're telling me like I have to do this because it works well for you, you're kind of telling me that I can't be responsible for myself, and that in itself like leads to discomfort and discontent, right? So I think it's so important to allow your employees to take a little bit of ownership for themselves. And look, if you have an employee that is working remotely or they're partially working from home and they're not getting their work done, that's an issue. And that is a conversation to be had. But I do think it's important to give people that option. And look, obviously there are some roles that like you physically just need to be in person, and that's a completely different story. But if
Yeah.
it's a role, an organization where you technically could do either, I personally, and again, having spoken to literally thousands of people over the years, I know that that's something that's incredibly important
Mhm.
to, again, millennial Gen Z generation.
I mean, I would imagine if an individual is not getting their work done in a virtual environment, them coming into the office isn't going to change much. Like that's more of a byproduct of potentially the individual or the circumstances in which
Right.
they're giving them their job responsibilities, and maybe they're not giving them the tools they need to thrive at their work.
Right.
But I think, yeah, the idea that people need to be in the office so we can watch over them, that's such like an antiquated, like I feel like early like
Exactly.
1900s kind of concept of employment. And I guess it's
Yeah.
good to see that that is a that has prevalence still in the current workforce, that the hybrid model is
Yeah.
proving to
Yeah.
work. And I feel like emotionally, it's just nice too. Like we said, like it gives a good emotional balance of like, hey, like I can, is I don't even have to take time off, but like I can be a little bit closer to home to be able to manage some of these like life circumstances. Like that helps, I
Exactly.
would imagine, with things like burnout, which I know you talk about a lot too. It's like, actually,
100%.
can we talk about that for a little bit? Because
Sure.
that's a topic that is discussed a lot, but I don't feel like there's ever like resolutions other than like take some time off. And So what do you say
Mhm.
to folks that are suffering from burnout?
Well, I think that one thing as we kind of go back to like alignment and fulfillment, I actually think that a lot of the time burnout isn't necessarily from like doing too much, but it's actually from doing work that where you feel completely unaligned, right? And like if you think about as we're talking about, we love our job, we're really excited about it, we feel passionate about it, and you might have like a period of a few months where like you are grinding because you have a lot going on and there's stuff going on with clients, all these things. You might feel tired and you might be like, okay, this weekend I need to really decompress and rest. But I would argue, or I would ask you, you're probably not being like, oh, I'm so burnt out and I'm like at the edge and I'm completely burnt out, right? Because ultimately, like you're very in line and engaged by the work that you're doing. And as opposed to somebody who's like kind of doing this thankless work that again doesn't feel aligned with their skills, where they don't feel good and excited about it, like that's ultimately where I found people feel more burnt out. Because we can
Mhm.
always take time and space to decompress, we can take a vacation, but like if you're then coming back from that vacation and going back into work that you're like, I really like this is not for me, that sense of being burnt out isn't going to go away as much. So that's kind of my opinion and belief around burnout.
Honestly, that might be the best way I've ever heard someone describe it, because I've had stints of life where, or we call it seasons, as we've been talking about on this podcast, where it's like it's head down, just grinding work. But then on the other side of it, I'm like, this is great. I mean, I'm tired at the end of the days, and I, maybe miss my family, and then so for me, it's always the balance of like, yeah, I go too hard in work and then I miss my family, and then then I want to take time off and be with them. But I feel
Yep.
accomplished at the end of
Yeah.
those seasons of life where I'm like, this is great. Like that was worth the effort, versus having that misalignment or having this like thankless position or work that you're doing where you're like, that sucked. And that,
Yeah.
so not only is it hard and a grind, but it's not honoring any kind of value system for you. Like there's no reward there either, other than maybe the money
Exactly.
that you
Yeah.
get by doing the thing, which isn't enough in a lot of instances. I think that's the best way I've heard anyone describe it before.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, and I think and I think ultimately it's like that and that pattern when it continues for too long,
Right.
that's when you truly burn out, right? And I think it's such a good indicator of again, there are going to be seasons, and there might be even a season of work where you're doing work that feels less aligned, and you feel really quote unquote burnt out by it, and
Mhm.
that's okay. It might happen occasionally. It's just a matter of like, is this continuously happening? And if it is, that's definitely an indicator of kind of pausing and saying, okay, what is going on? Why am I feeling this way? Like starting to investigate some of the work that you're doing and asking yourself, like, what is it about this work that I really don't like? Is there a way that I could think or approach this in a different way? Again, is this a conversation to be had with my manager? Because ultimately, like, you're more valuable when you're doing work that aligns with your strengths and your skill sets, right? And ultimately a good manager doesn't want a burnt out employee because that's not going to help from a productivity perspective, and that's not going to reflect well on them because your work is going to start to dwindle into slack as well, right? So thinking about that, when that's showing up, is it consistently happening? That's kind of a time to pause, to reflect, to start thinking about what needs to change. Is it a big change? Is it a small change? Who are the conversations I need to be, who do I need to be engaging with and talking to, and
Mhm.
thinking about that.
I mean, it goes back to what we were saying earlier, which is, being an advocate for yourself, being proactive and thinking about this stuff, or identifying the burnout or what's causing it. Because,
Yeah.
I think, I mean, I kind of carry this pressure as, so we have a small team, including myself, there's 8 of us, but
Mhm.
if you rewind just a few years ago, it was myself and Matt, my business partner, so it was like, it was a team of 2, and it's exploded in my mind to a team of 8. And it's
Yeah.
amazing. Like everyone on our
Huge.
team is amazing. And I'm grateful, but I always worry, that crosses my mind a lot. Like, is anyone on the team experiencing burnout and or feeling maybe misaligned from the work that I know if they were doing, they could give their highest output towards?
Mhm.
And, I hope more employers think that way, because sometimes, I mean, I might think that and I don't even know the answer yet, but like at least just maybe having that consideration from the employer perspective, I would imagine makes for a good work environment, or at least it makes steps in that direction. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. I just think that it this cuts both ways. Like you as the, we're kind of looking at it maybe from one stance, like the employee trying, making sure that you're proactive and being an advocate for your own situation. But I think the employer needs to have that same level of proactiveness in how they're thinking. And this is
Exactly.
all stuff that you help folks with. I mean, this is what I find to be most amazing. Like as I, kind of came across you and your information and following you on social media and whatnot, I kind of quickly learned that these are the types of conversations. Like, it's not just like the table stake stuff of like career
Right.
development. Like this stuff is so empowering. Can we talk a little bit about your team? Because I know it's not just
Sure.
you now. You have a pretty big team yourself.
Yes. So I guess it was already about 2 years ago with coaching. I kind of realized, in growing a business, obviously, one-on-one coaching is not always the most scalable model, and everybody, only has so much time in the day. And so I started bringing on coaches, some of whom I like honestly met through social media, and then many of whom came through referrals. I'm obviously very big on referrals always when you're looking and when you're looking to hire. And I grew this team of just incredible coaches, all of us who have like a very similar ethos and belief about what careers can be and what they should be, and kind of the skill sets and the tactics needed to ultimately get there. So it's great. As I mentioned, we're all virtual, so we're kind of all scattered across the US, which is great because we have a perspective of different markets and things like that. But it's so nice, especially as an entrepreneur working for yourself. It can feel lonely at times. So outside of the idea of being able to help more people, it was also selfishly an opportunity for me to kind of like create this community of coaches. And we have this amazing Slack group where we'll exchange ideas. And if somebody's working with a client and needs support, they'll drop a question in and think about, hey, here's how I'm thinking about supporting them, and things like that. So we always think there's this element of like group think that when one of our clients works with us, they're actually secretly working with 8 coaches behind
Yeah.
it, and have the brain power of a bunch of people who are really, experts in their field and excited about what they do. So it's been so exciting to kind of lean into that, HR side of like talent development and things like that too.
I I really identify with what you just said, because for us it's the same thing. It's like, you could hire a financial planner, and at some point, you kind of become the jack of all trades, master of none. Like, it's hard to know every single area about everything financially ever.
Yeah.
And so we deploy as a team. We call it the ensemble approach, but it's very similar to what you said. Like, there's that groupthink
Yes.
aspect where it's like, hey, someone's dealing with this thing, maybe, and then maybe that means pulling in that other coach instead of you, because they've served that situation, or that whatever the nuances that person's dealing with, or if nothing else, at least giving you that perspective and being able to ultimately provide a better conversation and a better outcome for the folks that you serve. And so, Eliana, so your team works with folks one-on-one. You also have some courses. I know that the
Yeah.
career upgrade course is a big one. Can we just talk a
Mhm.
little bit about that for a moment?
Sure. So yeah, we work with people one-on-one. We also have a program. It's called the Career Upgrade Program, which is kind of a hybrid program that combines both group and one-on-one coaching. So kind of best of
Cool.
both worlds. And then we also have kind of a course, self-paced course version of that program, which is called the Career Upgrade course. And you're going through self-paced modules to really kind of go through our 4-step process, which kind of touches on a little bit of what we talked about today, kind of starting with the confidence and the mindset work, then moving into alignment, really thinking about, okay, what is the right career path for me, kind of starting to develop the personal brand around it, then
Mhm.
moving into more tactical elements like relationship building, networking, making sure your resume, your LinkedIn are reflective of the direction you're going, and then kind of the final phase of communication skills, interview prep, presentation skills. How am I, presenting myself to others? What am I doing to stand out? And all those elements. So that's kind of like that 4-step process is really the foundation and the bread and butter to all of our programs. And
Mhm.
then it's just ultimately how you engage with us with that, whether it's one-on-one, whether it's a group and one-on-one element, whether it's strictly, on your own, depending on like who the individual is and the type of support that they're looking for.
Yeah, this was so awesome getting to chat with you. I knew it would be, and I wanted to spend the last couple of minutes just talking about the work that you do. And I think the final question that I have for you is like, where can they actually find you to connect with you? Because I mean, this people need this type of service. I just
Mhm.
think it's so valuable. So whether it's social media or maybe the website, what are the best places folks can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is just elianagoldsteincoaching.com, and then LinkedIn. I mean, I'm on Instagram as well, and I've always had a big, community there, but I really I put more of my attention and focus towards LinkedIn these days, just given, the field that I'm in. So, and
Yeah.
that's just my name too, Eliana Goldstein. I should hopefully come up on LinkedIn if you search me there. And I'm always my messages are always open. I love to chat with people. So yeah, feel free to, give me a shout if anybody needs.
I've heard you say that your network is your currency. And I think
Yes,
LinkedIn is like such a great place for, I mean, years ago, LinkedIn really had kind of fallen out of favor, but in the last, I mean, I'm talking like 10 plus years ago, but I mean, right now it is in my opinion, it seems like the social network for your professional career. That's obvious, but
100%.
it's just different than what people maybe might remember it as, right?
It really is. I think, well, LinkedIn, both from the perspective of obviously as an employee who's looking to grow and develop, obviously that's the best place to, meet new people and to network. But even for business owners, in
Hmm.
terms of growth opportunity, LinkedIn really offers the best opportunity to grow quickly. I mean, like my husband, for example, started posting a lot about AI recently. He works in real estate and he's grown this incredible community really quickly because it's just in terms of visibility, if there's a
Mm.
lot more bang for your buck and there's not as much confusion around the algorithm and is it changing and things like that. So when you think about kind of meeting new people, building a personal brand for yourself, there's no better place to do it than LinkedIn.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Eliana, as we're wrapping up the show, any final words of wisdom for our audience?
So this is a little more tactical. And I know we were talking about this before, but just in the context of coming up on end of year, because this is something I see this every single year. Come December 1st, my team and I will get a flurry of inquiries from people who go, oh my gosh, I just realized I have a professional development stipend and it expires on December 31st and I really want to do coaching or whatever it is. So this is just a heads up to everybody. It does not have to be for coaching. It could be for, financial planning, whatever it is. Make sure you explore if your company offers some type of professional development or L&D stipend. Even if they don't advertise it, if you email HR, they might have it. And it's quite literally money that might be left on the table. So definitely look into it, whether you're using it for your career or some other type of, personal and professional development exploration. It's a really important thing to take advantage of. And a lot of you probably have access to it and don't even realize.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said that because that's something I wanted to mention too. I mean, there are so many different employee benefits that are out there that folks just frankly don't even pay attention to or even know about. So there's a stipend potentially for professional development. Is it almost like, is it kind of along the same lines of maybe like tuition reimbursement? Does it fall into that same
Exactly.
bucket usually? Okay.
Exactly. And it all depends. Every company is a little bit different in terms of what it can be used towards. We always have it, again, really a ton of people towards the end of the year who will use it for coaching. And sometimes a lot of that coaching can sometimes be thinking about leadership skills and working on my communication skills, or they're navigating some type of internal move. So using it actually to improve and chart their growth within their own organizations. Honestly, I've also had some companies who are just incredible and support clients who are thinking about making external moves elsewhere. Or
Hmm.
sometimes, you don't say you're using it for that directly, but you do end up
Right.
using it for that. But yeah, I've seen it across so many different there's so many different ways to use it. And it's an incredible benefit that quite frankly, a lot of companies offer. And some offer 500 and some companies will offer $2,000. It
Yeah.
really can vary.
Well done on employers who are doing that, I think, because
Yes.
that it kind of goes back to what a lot of the theme of what we've been talking about today is, which is investing in yourself and being an
Yep.
advocate for yourself and making sure that you're setting this time aside to be proactive in your career. So kudos to those employers that are doing that, because I think that's helping folks, continue to do that for themselves. So Eliana, this
Absolutely.
was a blast. Thank you
Oh my
again
gosh.
for coming on the show and just educating not only myself but our listeners. And as always, thank you to our listeners for tuning in to the Above Board podcast. We love these conversations. We love our community. If you prefer to watch conversations like this instead of listening to them, head over to our YouTube channel and subscribe to our podcast. You can find us at Candor Path or search the Above Board podcast on YouTube. Thanks for listening to our show today. Eliana, thanks for joining us. And we'll see everyone next week.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.